Are you tired of systems that reduce the chaos of life into a single idea, a single truth, a single way of seeing? Have you ever felt suffocated by the promise of unity, the tyranny of neat philosophies that explain everything, yet leave no room for your contradictions, your doubts, your wild plurality of moods? In this video, we venture into the radical, unsettling, and liberating world of William James, a thinker who dared to challenge the comfort of monism, who invited us to dwell in the multiplicity of experience without flinching. James did not offer a new system. He offered a new attitude. Not a new answer, but a way of bearing questions with courage and honesty. Attention to the details of your inner life. Interest in the unresolved, the provisional. Desire for a worldview that can hold both tears and laughter, science and religion, personal anguish and public ideals. These are not contradictions to be resolved. They are the conditions of a life fully lived. James teaches us that only by resisting the lure of total explanation can we truly honor the depth of human experience. Monism says, there is only one. James whispers back, but what if there are many and each is real? This is not a philosophy class. This is not a tribute. This is a provocation. To live, to feel, to think beyond the craving for unity. Stay with us if you're willing to think. Dangerously, to stand in the storm of difference and not seek immediate shelter. The mind, when set free from the monistic craving, does not collapse into chaos, it begins to perceive richness. William James, standing against the tides of metaphysical absolutism, did not demand that we replace one totalizing vision with another. He invited us to walk among the fragments and find vitality there. This first step is not an argument. It is an orientation to loosen the grip of systems that reduce experience and begin to inhabit the world as it truly is, varied, inconsistent, plural. Imagine a man walking through a forest not seeking a single trail, but allowing each branching path to suggest new possibilities. James would say that this man is closer to the truth than any logician clutching his diagram of metaphysical unity. He insisted that the world we inhabit is not a completed structure, but a living flux, a multiverse rather than a universe, and that our consciousness should mirror this plurality, not defy it. James approached life like a dramatist, not a geometer. His psychology, his philosophy, his pragmatism, these were not blueprints but scripts for entering the drama of life with openness. When he wrote of the stream of consciousness, it was to remind us that no fixed concept can hold what flows through us moment to moment. Each sensation, each thought, each impulse, these are not shadows of a higher unity, but vivid realities on their own terms. To think beyond monism is to abandon the dream of final answers. It is to admit that the world may never fully agree with itself, and that this is not a tragedy, but a gift. It is to understand that difference is not a failure of unity, but a condition of life. If you've ever felt disoriented by competing truths, by voices that cannot be reconciled, James invites you to pause, not to solve, but to see, to perceive the dignity of each perspective, even when they clash. Truth for James was not a singular gem hidden beneath appearances. It was a process, a conversation, a living negotiation between minds and the world they encounter. And in this, he saw something sacred, not the sacred of doctrines, but the sacred of experience itself. A sunrise and a scream, a prayer and a calculation, all held in the same generous view. As you watch this video, we ask not for your agreement. We ask for your attention. We ask that you suspend the desire for a final synthesis. Like, subscribe, and stay with us not for closure, but for openings. If monism is the search for a single key to unlock the universe, then William James asks us to consider a house with many doors, each opening onto a different room, each offering its own atmosphere, its own truth. To prefer one door, one room is a kind of blindness. To pretend the house is just one room is a kind of violence. James demands that we relinquish the comfort of the singular and develop the moral imagination to dwell among irreducible differences. He saw how the human mind is, tempted by simplicity. In science, in religion, in politics, our instinct is to smooth the wrinkles of reality to render it flat and manageable. Monism is not merely a metaphysical position. It is a psychological craving. It soothes. It calms. It gives us the illusion of coherence. But James looked deeper. He knew that the world, like the soul, is not smooth. It is jagged, surprising, inconsistent. And he dared to say, "Let it be so." In the second chapter of his Pragmatism, James warns of the tender-minded and the tough-minded. The tender seek unity, the tough seek facts. The monist, tender-minded, wants an eternal one. But life, James argues, is made not by unity but by struggle, by the collision of ideas, by the discomfort of contradiction. The real philosopher is not the one who brings peace, but the one who endures unrest with integrity, and this endurance is not abstract. It is a lived posture. In our personal lives, we are often torn between opposing desires, freedom and belonging, passion and safety, solitude and intimacy. Monism would have us resolve the tension. James insists we live in it. He teaches that the highest wisdom may come not from choosing one over the other, but from allowing both to be present, fully, without resolution. This is not relativism. It is respect. It is not confusion. It is complexity. To value differences is not to say all things are equal. It is to say that no one thing has the right to silence the others. Each voice matters. Each path matters. Each fragment of experience deserves its space. In this pluralistic universe, truths are born in experience, not deduced from principles. The scientist in the lab, the mystic in meditation, the child asking impossible questions, each is a participant in the creation of meaning. James believed in a universe still in the making, one where our choices, our perceptions, even our failures, shape reality itself. So we must resist the false comfort of completeness. We must learn to live with a mind that does not settle. And in that unrest, find beauty. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast ocean, the waves crashing in unpredictable rhythms, each crest and trough a fragment of a larger movement that never resolves. This is how William James understood consciousness, not as a fixed stage with a rehearsed script, but as an improvisational performance, always in flux, never concluding. To live in such a world is to relinquish the fantasy of control, to replace it with a radical openness to experience as it unfolds. James rejected the idea of the self as a single, unchanging entity. Instead, he offered the self as a chorus, a parliament of conflicting voices and tendencies, none of which hold absolute authority. This plural self is not an affliction, but a richness. One moment, we are contemplative, spiritual. The next, analytical, cynical. And still another, playful or melancholic. The monistic impulse wants to unify these into a coherent identity. James refuses. He calls us to accept the wild, contradictory abundance of what it means to be human. And this is not merely introspective, it is ethical. If we demand simplicity in ourselves, we will demand it in others. We will impose systems, ideologies, definitions. We will silence what does not fit. But if we can make peace with our own fragmentation, we become more capable of allowing others theirs. Difference is no longer a threat. It becomes a source of moral vision. James' pluralism is not theoretical. It is existential. It insists that truth is forged in lived encounter, that no viewpoint, no theory, no religion, no science owns reality. Each touches it, refracts it, shapes it, and is in turn shaped by it. We do not live in a cosmos that is already finished. We live in a becoming dot to believe this is not to fall into despair. It is to awaken to responsibility. If reality is not fixed, then our actions matter profoundly. Every act of attention, of kindness, of thought helps sculpt the real. The world is not a closed system, it is porous, plastic, impressionable. This is the heart of Jamesian thought, the refusal to close the book, the courage to write in the margins, the humility to admit we do not yet know all there is to know, and the audacity to keep searching. As you listen, ask yourself, in what ways have you tried to simplify yourself or the world for the sake of comfort? What have you ignored, excluded, or denied in the name of unity? James asks you not to erase your contradictions, but to live them more deeply. There is a scene, imaginary but vital, in which a philosopher stares into a night sky, asking whether the stars follow a plan or dance in freedom. For the monist, the answer must be, they follow. For William James, the answer remains open. What if the cosmos does not follow a plan? What if it listens, hesitates, responds? What if its truths emerge not from necessity, but from risk? This is not mysticism. This is metaphysical courage. James introduces us to a universe in which chance is not a flaw but a feature, not an error to be corrected but a condition of freedom. He speaks of a world shot through with contingency, where the future is not yet written, and where human agency frail, flawed, magnificent matters. The monist vision craves a finished script. James insists the play is still being written, that we, trembling actors, must ad-lib our way forward. This is terrifying and exhilarating. And human. From this emerges his fierce defense of the will to believe, not as a license for wishful thinking, but as a profound acknowledgement. Sometimes we must leap before the evidence is complete. And what makes this moment genuine is that the choice is forced, live, and momentous. You cannot defer it without forfeiting it. You cannot remain neutral without consequence. You cannot undo the passage of time. To James, belief in such moments is not optional, it is destiny. Not in the fatalistic sense, but in the profoundly human sense. You must act, you must decide. And in doing so, you create not only the path forward, but the very being who walks it. In his seminal essay, The Will to Believe, James writes against the backdrop of a culture obsessed with evidence, obsessed with proof, obsessed with withholding assent until certainty arrives. He challenges this intellectual puritanism by arguing that in certain domains of human experience, religion, morality, personal vocation, waiting for certainty is to miss the train entirely. There is no neutral ground. Not believing is itself a belief, and that belief carries consequences. Take the example of love. Imagine two people drawn to each other. Each waits for assurance, for some absolute guarantee that the other feels the same. Each hesitates. Each shields their heart. And in the end, neither dares. The possibility dies, not because it was impossible, but because it was unlived. Faith, in effect, can help create the fact, James declares. Belief must sometimes come first, must precede evidence, must make the evidence. If you believe she might love you, you act with openness, vulnerability, presence. Those actions become the very condition for love to arise. The belief is not a lie, it is a prophecy you make true by the integrity with which you live it. This, James says, is the creative function of belief. It is not a retreat from reason. It is an extension of reason into the realm of lived experience, where abstraction falters and life demands courage. The will to believe is not the abandonment of intellect. It is the declaration that not all truths can be known before they are chosen. This is especially urgent in matters of moral action. Suppose you see someone suffering. Do you believe your help will make a difference? You don't know. But if you believe it might, you are moved to act. That action itself becomes meaningful, dignified. The belief becomes its own justification, not because it guarantees success, but because it enlivens the moral will. James argued that our moral and spiritual decisions are often choices to live as if certain ideals were true, because in doing so, we increase the reality to live as if justice were possible, as if change were within reach, as if human dignity were not a dream but a right. These are not naive fantasies. These are affirmations forged in fire of what James called the moral republic, the society of souls who wager together on meaning even when the data is silent. There is an inherent solitude in this. The will to believe is not something that can be outsourced. No one can do it for you. No algorithm can calculate it. It requires a stance, a poise in the soul that says, I will not wait for guarantees. I will risk myself, not because the odds are in my favor, but because the alternative is to live half dead, paralyzed by the illusion of neutrality. Belief, in this Jamesian sense, is a revolutionary act. It challenges the tyranny of the already known. It opens a clearing where the not yet becomes visible. And in that clearing, life itself becomes a canvas for the will. So when you find yourself on that threshold, trembling, unsure, remember, the question is not whether belief is safe. The question is whether you are willing to risk becoming the person who acts anyway. The night before a life-changing decision is unlike any other. Sleep is shallow. Thoughts race in spirals. The world seems charged with a kind of electric uncertainty. You are caught between possibilities, each vivid, each plausible, each demanding your allegiance. It is not logic that fails you. It is abundance. Too many truths, too many reasons, too many what-ifs. And beneath them all, the quiet, aching need to believe in something, even if just long enough to take the next step. In this liminal space, William James becomes a companion like no other. He does not offer resolution. He offers permission. Permission to commit, to wager, to act without certainty. This is the heartbeat of his philosophy, that the most vital decisions in life, whom to love, what to stand for, where to devote your energies, must often be made without waiting for the universe to show its hand. He writes, we have the right to believe at our own risk any hypothesis that is live enough to tempt our will. That is a radical statement. It places the responsibility for truth not in some impersonal cosmos, but in your capacity to respond. It asks, are you willing to let your belief precede the evidence, not in opposition to it, but an invitation of it? Consider a person who believes they are meant to teach. There is no proof, only a hunch, a flame, a strange alignment between inner voice and outer circumstance. If they wait for definitive evidence, they will never enter the classroom. But if they act as though their calling is real study, practice, offer themselves, they may become precisely the teacher they imagined. Their belief does not follow from fact. The fact follows from their belief. And yet, we hesitate. Not because we lack desire, but because we fear being wrong. We fear wasting time, looking foolish, being disappointed. James knew this fear intimately. He did not preach from abstraction. He wrote from the trenches of his own psychological struggle. Depression, indecision, existential dread, he bore them all. And through them, he forged a philosophy of courage, one that affirms the risk of belief as part of life itself. He tells us that the mind is not a passive recorder. It is a choosing force. What you attend to grows. What you affirm with your energy becomes real, if not in the cosmos, then in your experience. To believe in your ability, your worth, your mission is not arrogance, it is creation. It is stepping into a world that is still in the making. James's universe is not closed. It is open, plural, unfinished. Every moment carries potential that will either be activated or ignored. Your belief is the lever. You cannot believe everything, but you must believe something. And that something, if chosen wisely, can animate your entire existence. This is not the belief of dogma or indoctrination. It is not belief in rigid creeds. It is belief as trust, as fidelity to your deepest intuitions. It is belief as moral action. And it invites a vital question, one only you can answer. What belief, if you were brave enough to hold it, would change the trajectory of your life? Not a belief that explains everything, not a belief that guarantees success, but a belief that awakens you, that calls you out of hiding, that insists, even in the absence of proof, that you must begin. James would urge you, dare to believe, not because belief is always rewarded, but because refusing to believe is often more costly. It leaves you inert, disconnected, waiting for clarity that may never come. And so, as you sit in that space between fear and faith, know this: belief is not the enemy of truth. It is the midwife of possibility. It is the form your courage takes when reason runs out. A man walks into a room filled with strangers. He does not know their names, their histories, their intentions. And yet, something deep within him shapes his posture, his tone, his eyes. He believes they are hostile. Or perhaps he believes they are curious. He believes they will mock him, or he believes they might welcome him. Whatever he believes, his behavior adjusts almost imperceptibly, and the room responds in kind. This is the Jamesian feedback loop of belief and world. It is not mysticism. It is psychology at its most raw. The way you approach reality alters how reality approaches you. William James insisted, belief is not just something we hold. It is something that holds us, frames our perception, guides our attention, writes the script of our lives. And because of that, belief is not merely epistemological, it is performative. This has profound implications. You are not an observer of your life. You are a participant. You are not reporting from the sidelines, you are on the field. Your beliefs don't just interpret reality, they enact it. You expect rejection, so you tense, withdraw, telegraph defensiveness. You expect recognition, so you open, engage, invite connection. These are not neutral stances. They are invitations. They shape what happens next. James understood that belief is a wager, not in the sense of gambling, but in the sense of existential investment. You place your faith in a certain view of the world, and you live as if that view were real. Sometimes it pays off. Sometimes it doesn't. But the risk is unavoidable. Even the refusal to believe is a kind of belief in futility, in closure, in a world where nothing you do can matter. This is where James's pragmatism turns inward, toward character. Who are you becoming through the beliefs you affirm? Do your beliefs expand your capacity for courage, generosity, creativity? Or do they shrink your world and close you in cynicism and resignation? He urges us to examine not just the content of belief, but its effects. A belief is true, James says, if it works satisfactorily in the broadest sense, if it fosters life, coherence, growth. Think of a time when you believed in something fiercely, perhaps irrationally. Maybe it was a dream no one else understood. Maybe it was love that defied convenience. Maybe it was the belief that you could overcome what had always defeated you. That belief didn't merely reflect your world. It made a new one possible. And if you lost that belief, perhaps the world changed with it. The room grew darker, the silence heavier. This is why James sees belief not as a luxury, but as a responsibility. especially in moments where outcomes are uncertain, especially when the data is incomplete. Belief becomes a moral stance, an act of fidelity to your higher self, even in the face of ambiguity. The will to believe is the will to act as if your commitment could transform the terrain. And so the practical question arises, how do you choose your beliefs? Not all beliefs are equal. Some are inherited, absorbed unconsciously from family, culture, media. Others are chosen deliberately, forged in solitude, tested through suffering. James would ask you to treat your beliefs as hypotheses, live them. Observe them, refine them. See what they do, how they shape your days, which ones elevate you, which ones betray you. He does not promise comfort, he promises clarity. And the clarity is this: your beliefs matter more than you think. They are not incidental. They are foundational. They are the soil in which your actions grow. You cannot escape the need to believe, but you can take responsibility for what you choose to believe in. So as you move through your life, its challenges, its routines, its moments of crisis, ask yourself again and again, what world am I creating through my beliefs? And when doubt returns, as it always does, remember that belief is not a one-time leap. It is a practice, a rhythm, a vow renewed with every step you take toward a future not yet visible, but waiting to be made real. It begins with a flicker, a thought barely formed, an image not yet real. What if I could? The sentence is never finished aloud, but it lingers. It lingers in the margins of your mind, in the quiet between distractions, in the sighs you let slip at night. That flicker is belief, embryonic, unguarded. It is not yet a doctrine. It is not even a plan. It is simply the soul turning its face toward possibility. William James calls this moment the germ of volition, the seed of the will. Before we act, before we decide, there is this silent court where beliefs are weighed not in syllogisms, but in temperature, texture, tone. James never tired of saying that our beliefs arise not only from logic, but from our passional nature. That is, from our desires, our fears, our hopes, our embodiment. And this nature is not a flaw in the machinery of reason. It is the furnace in which our commitments are forged. Think about it. Have you ever truly changed your life because of a fact alone? Or was it always some deeper conviction and invisible force that stirred you to move? James insists that belief must be understood in the context of the whole human being. Belief is not a yes or no switch. It is a direction of the heart. This is where the will enters not as brute force, but as focus, as the ability to sustain attention on a possibility long enough for it to gather gravity. James studied this with obsessive care. The faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will, he wrote. The will is not some mystical spark. It is the disciplined refusal to forget what matters. And what matters is this: your belief in something, however small, becomes the condition for that thing's development. You do not build a bridge by staring at the river. You build it by believing, absurdly at first, that a bridge can stand there. You act as if it could, and the act reveals the path. Now consider belief in others. James knew that belief is social. It transmits. It infects. When you believe in someone, you change the texture of their reality. You open a space in which they can become. This is why James opposed the cynicism of the age, the sneer of intellectual superiority that dismisses all devotion as naivety. He argued that belief in others is not gullibility, it is creation. He wrote, "To disbelieve is to destroy." Not always, not inevitably, but often enough. The person who never hears a word of belief will rarely become more than what their surroundings assume. But belief, even whispered, even tentative, is a gift. It is a scaffolding upon which new identities may rise. You felt this. When someone believed in you, when they saw something in you before you could articulate it yourself, it altered your course. Their belief gave you permission to try, to fail, to rise again. And now you too have that power. Your belief in others is not an opinion. It is a responsibility. But belief also demands discernment. James was no romantic. He understood the danger of false belief, of unchecked illusion. He warned against the seduction of certainty, of clinging to beliefs simply because they comfort. True belief for James must always remain vulnerable to correction, always engaged with experience. Pragmatism demands that beliefs work, that they animate, clarify, liberate. So you ask, how do I know if a belief is worth keeping? James would answer, live with it. Watch what it does. Does it energize your effort, deepen your joy, connect you to others? Or does it isolate, drain, diminish? Belief is not a static possession. It is a living relationship with the world. And in this light, the act of believing becomes sacred. Not because it guarantees truth, but because it honors the process by which we become true to something, to a task, to a vision, to each other. There's a silence that comes not from peace, but from suppression, a silence where belief has withered under the weight of disappointment. You've tried before. You've leapt before. You believed and life did not deliver. The heartbreaks, the failures, the humiliations, they didn't just hurt. They eroded something foundational. They made belief feel dangerous, naive, childish. William James understood this better than most philosophers. He did not preach from a pedestal of certainties. He lived in the tension between faith and despair. He knew what it meant to stare into the abyss and wonder whether any belief could be worth the cost. But even from that place, he insisted, the will to believe is not about blind optimism. It is about defiance, a sacred refusal to let past pain become the final word. This is not about ignoring reality. It is about choosing which reality to respond to. James tells us that the universe is not a finished sculpture, but a half-welded thing, unfinished, still soft at the edges, still responsive to effort and attention. Your beliefs are part of what hardens it in one direction or another. And that means belief, even after loss, is not regression. It is rebellion. It is the act of saying, I will not let this wound define what is possible. He once wrote, we are spinning our own fates, good or evil, and never to be undone. That spinning is done with choices, and those choices are structured by belief. Even after failure, you are not static. You are not trapped. The next action you take becomes part of your world. The next thought you affirm becomes a thread in your future. But it is hard, isn't it? To believe again after disillusionment. To risk your heart once more when it has been broken. James offers no shortcuts. What he offers is respect. Respect for the gravity of belief. For its power to resurrect hope, not cheaply, but deliberately. To believe again is not to forget what hurt you. It is to decide that the hurt does not have the right to shrink your soul. He wrote of the faith ladder, a psychological process by which we ascend from uncertainty toward commitment. At first, we simply imagine the belief. Then we conceive it as possible. Then we see reasons to support it. Then we choose to act as if it were true. And finally, with time and integrity, it becomes part of who we are. This ladder is not a delusion. It is a strategy of becoming. It honors both doubt and desire. And here is where James becomes most radical. He claims that belief is a kind of creative force. When you believe, you do not merely interpret reality, you help make it. Your belief, if acted upon, initiates new causal chains in the universe. What you say, what you do, what you feel, these ripple outward, changing what? is possible not just for you, but for others. Belief is a moral act, not because it guarantees good outcomes, but because it declares that you are still in the game. This vision is not sterile philosophy. It is a call to live, a call to refuse the paralysis of doubt, a call to stand even, if trembling, and say, I will believe again. Not because I am certain, but because I am alive. James once asked, what is life but a series of moral choices, made without full information, but made nonetheless because to not choose is to die? He invites you, here and now, to reclaim your agency, not to pretend the pain didn't happen, but to act as though something beautiful could still emerge from it, because it can. It has. It will. Picture a woman standing on a stage, lights burning hot, crowd silent, breath caught. Her knees are trembling. She does not feel ready. She does not feel certain. Every instinct in her body says she is not enough, but still she steps forward. She opens her mouth. She speaks. What got her there was not knowledge, it was belief. A belief she rehearsed privately, painfully, in the shadows of self-doubt. A belief that, if she dared to act as if she belonged there, she might begin to actually belong. That is William James in motion, not in theory, but in the texture of lived experience. To believe is to bet your life on a possibility. James teaches that belief is not simply about what we think. It is about what we do with what we think. The will to believe is an existential practice. We test our ideas not in laboratories alone, but in action, in love, in suffering, in perseverance. Belief, then, becomes a form of integrity, not because it avoids uncertainty, but because it embraces it with courage. And courage, in the Jamesian sense, is not about fearlessness. It is about the decision to live as if your deepest commitments matter, even when the world offers no assurances. You love without guarantee. You pursue justice without a map. You commit to a path not because it is certain, but because your soul cannot rest otherwise. This is the pragmatist spirituality, not anchored in dogma, but in consequence. You ask, what happens if I believe this? What does this belief do to my body, my habits, my relationships? Does it deepen my experience of the real? Does it awaken joy, connection, movement? If so, it is worth living, even if it remains in some ways unprovable. Now imagine the opposite. You withhold belief. You wait for certainty. You become a spectator of your own life, always analyzing, never risking. James warns that this kind of suspended animation is a form of death, not physical, but existential. You avoid error, yes, but you also avoid becoming. He draws a stark picture. The person who demands proof before living is like someone waiting for a fire to warm them before they add wood. It does not work that way. The warmth comes after the offering. The clarity comes after the leap. So what would it mean to live as if you believed in yourself? Not with arrogance, but with fidelity. What would it mean to act as if your creativity matters? As if your presence in the world could be healing? As if your voice, yes, yours was needed? These are not abstract inquiries. These are spiritual imperatives. James invites you to test them, not with dogma, but with practice. To live your belief and let life respond. And if life contradicts you, then revise, adapt. Believe again, more wisely. Belief is not a one-time event. It is a cycle, a dialogue between soul and circumstance. And within that dialogue, you are not a victim of fate. You are a co-author of meaning. So ask yourself now, in the quiet that follows this, what are you willing to act upon, even if you never receive final confirmation that it was right? That question is the gate. Your answer is the step. It ends where? It began in the stillness before the decision. The world has not changed. The facts are still ambiguous. The future remains unreadable. And yet, something in you has shifted. Not because new information appeared, but because your stance toward uncertainty has evolved. You are no longer asking, "Can I be sure?" You are asking, "Can I commit?" William James believed that the self is not a fixed entity, but a field of forces, desires, fears, thoughts, and above all, choices. The self is a verb, not a noun. And belief is the grammar through which that verb conjugates itself across time. When you believe, you choose a version of yourself to inhabit, and in inhabiting it, you give it flesh. This is not fiction. It is faith in action. It is the deepest form of realism available to the human spirit. He did not deny the failures of belief. He did not romanticize them, but he refused to abandon the premise that some things only come into being if we believe in them first, like trust, like redemption, like courage. Think of all that remains unfinished in your life, not because it cannot be done, but because you have not yet believed it worth doing. James asks you to revisit those places, not with fantasy, but with moral seriousness. To consider that belief is not about what you can justify, it is about what you are willing to live for. And this is where his philosophy becomes most dangerous, most beautiful. He places the burden back on you, not to know everything, but to stand for something. In a pluralistic, shifting world, belief is not about imposing truth. It is about creating spaces where truth might emerge through action, dialogue, and presence. So pause. Reflect. What are you willing to believe into existence, not because you are certain, but because the alternative is to live a smaller life? That question is not rhetorical. It is an invitation. It is also a responsibility. If this journey through William James's thought has moved you, if it has helped you see belief not as a weakness, but as a source of strength, then let that matter. Let that belief ripple outward. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, share this with 3 people who are standing at the edge of their own decision, because belief, when shared, multiplies.